Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are in the world. This is Sean Hewitt from the Trusted Business Community Association, and this meeting is the International Eastern meeting, which comes out from the UK across Europe, Asia, and obviously Africa, in towards our friends and colleagues over in Australia and New Zealand. Today we are joined by Kay Reeve, the emotional awareness expert, and she's going to talk about leadership and how emotional awareness can really drive your business and leadership skills forward. So without further ado, Kay Reeve, welcome to our international event and welcome as our keynote speaker.
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, I've been really looking forward to this, and I'm amazed that I'm actually up early in the morning. So I'm just, while I'm chatting away, going to get my presentation ready. So yes, I'm quite excited to talk about this in terms of, I've come in right at the end, bear with me. Right, so yes, today I'm going to get straight on with this because I know it's quite a short time and I'd like to leave some time for questions. As an emotional awareness expert, for me, emotions are all about the power of being human. And it's a journey that began back in 2015. And by 2017, I was already delivering a TEDx talk in Norwich, Norfolk, about the journey we were on with my son. And so to explain a little bit more about that, my backstory. Oh, my goodness, this is going everywhere this morning. Testing my emotions, look at that, fine, we'll roll with it. So a little bit about my backstory, because a lot of people still focus on what I do in terms of the teens and the parenting side through the messages I've given. So today I want to up that a little bit, but this is the backstory. Is my son was pretty much born with depression, bless him. 8 years old, he was diagnosed on the autistic spectrum, but it was also the year that he first tried taking his own life. He then spent the next 12 years being suicidal on and off until eventually I realized something really, really key. He couldn't understand his emotions because he couldn't see them. And like many neurodivergent people, he isn't a visual learner. And so this was where instantly my head was going, well, how am I supposed to teach him something that I can't explain? Right? How am I supposed to show him his world of hidden emotions? And that's where this diagram came from. And even that very first night, we put the kettle on, I grabbed a piece of paper, I started drawing little boxes and words and asking him questions. And it took me probably well over a year and a half to eventually come up with this diagram and study emotions enough to recognize that this is the pattern of the human emotional cycle, not just for how we feel, but for how we talk about it, how we use our voice, our body language, music, and so much more, that I actually had learned to see the pattern over everything universally. And from that very first night that I started developing this, that was the last time my son ever talked about dying. And for me, that was such a relief, and seeing the rapid transformation that happened within weeks, and still a continued journey, it still is, in my 30s, we're still working on it. But for everybody, personal development is a lifelong journey. But the main thing was that he came out of that deep, dark, depressive, suicidal state and started to improve rapidly. And then over the years, since 2015 or since 2017, when I left my job to start working on this independently, I've seen this help so many people along the way in similar effect with rapid transformations. And so just to give a very brief overview of this, we're looking at happiness, which is high emotions. You know, we say we feel on top of the world. We've got sadness, which is your blue. And we talk about sadness as thoughts and air, and emotions as water. And then you've got your anger, which is like your red rag to a bull. And we talk about passion and drive and motivation all fit here as well. And then we've got the depression at the bottom, like you're stuck in a rut and in the pits, and when everything is rock bottom and you're absolutely lost in life. So this really fits this kind of feelings that we get with the dynamics of how we feel as well, all included in the diagram. But the next thing I realized when teaching Matthew was, well, why do we change between emotions? Like literally, why do we have emotions? What purpose do they serve? And why do we change between them? So believe me, this diagram has sent me down many, many very deep, thoughtful rabbit holes over the years, with lots and lots of questions. And the simplest answer I could come up with that would explain it to a neurodivergent, depressed 20-year-old was, well, we change between emotions because something changed. Like you'd be happy at lunchtime in an absolute rage at night, and then another time you'd be sitting there absolutely depressed or really sad about something. And it's like, why did it keep changing? And so what changed was either external or internal, the world around us, or something in our thoughts, feelings, and beliefs. And so this is where the strategy started to build once we had this diagram. But it's not where it ended. So another thing I like to really draw attention to is that in a perfect world, we exist for three places, and that is home, work, or education. And when people are not in home, work, or education, we refer to them as homeless, uneducated, and out of work. And yet we know for many, many, many people on this globe that we don't fit in a perfect world. And that's where we have a fourth category that comes in. And that is charities, therapies, and all kinds of support systems. That's where the biggest amount of support is needed. And when you think about how many charities and support groups and businesses are needed all around the world, it highlights a lot of gaps in the first three. But they're also the ones where the biggest emotions sit as well, when emotions are out of sync. So for me, this is where the work that I've done over the years with my son has now led right through to leadership skills, where I'm looking for people who are in leadership positions, whether they are leadership at home, parenting, whether it is leadership skills at work, or the leaders in the education system. And my mission, my vision is to help with top-down learning in all of these sectors, to help prevent people falling into the fourth category, or to help them out of it into what feels more like a perfect life. So, as I said, for me, looking at the leadership side of this, it is whether people call it, excuse my voice, right, morning voice, this one. So whether it is referred to as I like the waterfall effect when we're talking about top-down learning, and this whole concept of leaders driving change. But it can also be talked about the butterfly effect, the ripple effect, there's the domino effect, and there's more. You know, different cultures, different places, different leaders have different ways of referring to it. But the point is, if they're in any position of leadership over anybody else and have the ability to influence others, whether it's in a children's group like a sports coach, or through the Guides and Brownies or something, right through to corporate leadership. In every single one of those positions, leaders are responsible for the emotions of others. And that waterfall effect, or that butterfly effect, or whatever you call it, can have an effect on everybody else that they lead. And if we're having a negative effect, that's when we tend to call it the ripple effect, or the butterfly, the domino effect comes in. But we really want to be looking at the more positive effect of this. If we have the ability to create an impact on people negatively, we need to be able to do that positively as well. And I want to give people the empowerment to do that when generations upon generations of humans have not picked up on all the right leadership skills, and instead of generationally passed on shame and blame and negative cultures that are not to blame any generation for doing this, but it's the way things have been passed on For some people, they may grow up and be passing on leadership skills based on a very domineering style of parenting that they received. Or it may be that they grew up with trauma and they're just trying to take back control. And so many reasons why all of these effects can be negative without actually realizing what they're doing. There's also many ways we can, with some slight reframing, with some lessons on personal development and leadership styles, actually turn those exact same negatives into a really positive leadership style. So with the leadership, a lot of that is one-to-one mentoring, as well as workshops and online courses. But some of the benefits of this are with the visual understanding, obviously, to begin with, because even people working in a workplace, whether they're, I don't know, leading in the NHS, whether in the services, whether it is a local GP is responsible for lots of patients, whether it is the foreman on a building construction site, right? Everybody's responsible for other people's emotions. And being able to support a lot of staff or patients or clients or colleagues who are also neurodivergent as well as neurotypical, it gives us that visual understanding for having a conversation. And that gives us a toolkit for talking. So even as a leader, if you're the only one that learns this, it gives you this visual diagram to mentally work through when asking questions and supporting other people. So it becomes your own internal guidance for supporting them. And that makes a huge change in how we support other people. And that, oops, knocked the button, that builds trust, right? So by being able to have conversations on that next level, that builds trust. And when you build trust with people, you can create transformation. You don't sit back and watch for it to happen or set rules in place and say, you must do that and then everything will change, right? We can create that change from a point of trust. This strategy also develops empathy skills. So there's one thing, as you know, how many people do we hear say there's a big difference between being a boss and being a leader, right? There are plenty of people out there who are managers, and they manage things. But there are a lot of other people who talk about leadership styles as in whether people are the managers or the bosses or directors, whatever they are, the leadership skills over the years have got recognized as separate from the management. That can be in the same person, it can be different people, but the leadership skills seem to be a separate set of soft skills in themselves that work alongside the management skills that run the actual companies and the teams and the client processes and everything else. And when we can combine the two, it's powerful. So it's bringing those into sync. So those empathy skills then really enhance leadership skills. When you can see your staff at a glance, you walk into an office or a workplace or a building site, and at a glance, you know who's having a good day, who's having a bad day, who you can trust to get on, and who you might need to offer a little support to. Rather than the traditional management of micromanaging, giving threats and orders and marching orders if they don't do their job for the end of the day. So how can we offer a little bit of support? And I give a very basic example on that. I have had a lot of micromanagement imposed on me over the years from different jobs. I've also had some leaders who were perhaps not top of the chain, but they were certainly like supervisors or colleagues who were in a position ahead of me somewhere, and their leadership skills were way ahead of those above in the management chains. But one manager in particular really stood out for me, and that was when I worked for an offshore wind farm, because a lot of my background before 2017 was in admin, right from in my early 20s, working for Dewsbury headquarters, right through to, say, working for the offshore wind farm when they built the first of the round 2 wind farms in the North Sea from 2010 onwards. But this particular manager was from Norway, and he had this leadership style that was absolutely perfect. And I learned so much from him over the years. And he'd walk in the morning into the office in reception where I was at times, And he'd look at me and go, office now. And it was just said so calmly and beautifully. And I would just go, okay. And once we were in the office, he'd just say, talk. And that was all he'd say, talk. And he knew the moment he walked in the office that I was carrying the weight of something that day. I didn't even have to tell him. Now, bearing in mind, this is the few years where I was still dealing with the tail end of my son's suicidal depression, whilst also trying to keep down my job in a corporate environment. And so he understood that. And he used to say to me, being a mum is tough. And we working as well. But he somehow knew that by giving me 2 minutes to listen, he earned my trust. And then I got on with my work for the day, but it helped me to process it, even just by saying it out loud. He didn't have to solve it for me. He didn't have to do anything for me. He just listened. And that to me was one of the most amazing leadership strategies I've seen, because most managers would totally ignore that, not know how to deal with it, tell you to get on with your job, threaten you for not doing it or not focusing. They'd nitpick and micromanage all of the mistakes you made. And by him taking 2 minutes a day to listen to me made a huge difference on those days when I'd been dealing for hours and hours and hours a night before with a suicidal teenager. And it meant I could get on with my day's work with a sense of peace of mind. And he used to say, if you need to go home, go. But I very rarely did, but occasionally I did. And I knew I could do it, knowing my job was safe. And that's where I'm talking about true leadership really builds trust. And then obviously, where is not to gain back time, money, and energy, rather than putting in all that negative micromanaging energy, by putting in a positive leadership energy, you're gaining back time and money through not constantly hiring staff again, through losing, constant staff turnover is a really obvious sign of a toxic management level or something not right within the ranks of the company or on a shop floor or building site. Because if the leadership level is toxic, even if it's unintentional and unaware, if there is toxicity in there in any kind, that feeds down through the ranks like the waterfall effect. Just like if you put poison in the top of a waterfall, all the water is going to get poisoned. And it's the same in a chain of command. And so these are some of the things that I like to work on. I'm aware my time's coming to the end. Sorry. So as I worked on this framework over the coming years, and I talked about the inner and outer change, I recognized that when we change between emotions because something changed, there are only 5 changes in the whole world that actually take place. When we look at it from a top tier level, when we chunk up life, and I like to chunk and organize and file, so my admin skills came in absolutely brilliant for creating this framework in organizing and filing. So one of those is health. When our health changes, it changes our emotions, both positively and negatively. And then I realized that every change has a root cause as well. And there's only 5 of them as well. So I managed to organize all this into 5. So that is the helps and the flight. So when we manage our emotions through emotional awareness, it helps flight. But that is the acronym that is my entire framework that I do teach over a longer period than the original workshops that I do. But I have created a framework where, even with a client I'm working on at the moment, I've been working with for about 7 months now, we have yet to find a situation in life that we cannot apply to this framework. Whatever we discuss, every single session, it fits within this framework. And when you have a life framework that gives you a starting point for every single challenge, it makes things easier to talk through and to plan through and think through. And this is where it has become the toolkit for talking. And so how can we help together? So thank you for listening today as amazing members of the TTBCA. And it's an absolute honour to be on the International Business Growth Hub for the first time. So thank you very much. And so for me, people who are at home, when we talked about the 3 ideal categories, there's books and journals, and I've got courses online. And I also have some workshops I can do on Eventbrite. Now, the workshop that I do first, which is what I call my red workshop, my introductory workshop, is the gateway to everything else that I train. So if anybody wants any other workshops, training, mentoring, it always begins with that one workshop. But it can also be the one that leads to parents getting off the ground with that support for their teens and young adults with the books and online courses as well. So my red workshop is really, really important in my entire framework. And that's the one that teaches the emotional cycle, where we take you through a deep dive through that process of understanding that. And then I do one-to-one private mentoring as well. And so to round up, this is, as a little thank you for listening, this is the day I did my TEDx talk in 2017. And this is my son, Matthew, who was there that day in the audience, and he was supporting me, which is a beautiful turnaround from where he'd been just 2 years before. And I really want to ask you now, what are your goals for 2026? And what are you reaching for? Because this little girl on the right is Matthew's little girl. 2 days before that TEDx talk, he'd announced to me that him and his girlfriend were expecting. And this is her a few years later when I was writing the book. And she was determined to get his little pull-up bars, or his pull-up bars wet reach, and she thought that little stool would help her get a little bit closer. And it looked so cute, so I grabbed a photograph, and that is in the back of my book, Brain Unchained. But thank you for listening, everybody, today. And yes, I'm aware I've gone a little bit over time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. That's really interesting. I've got a question for you. Big round of applause for everybody, if I may. Really, really interesting take on leadership and obviously micromanagement styles of others. Do you find, here's a question for you, do you find, because it's very visual, isn't it, what you do? It's based on visual. Do you find that this works best for leaders, managers who are all equally visually, that they work on a visual basis, or can that be transformed to somebody who's not a visual learner, for instance? Can what you teach help them to become more visual thinking or visualizing what's going on in the room? Because I could see, I work on a visual basis. I'm very much sort of like a if I see it, I can learn it a lot quicker than if somebody tells me and talks me through it. I have to physically do something, and then I've got it. So does what you're, from a leadership point of view, does that sort of also work into the realms of those that aren't visual leaders or visual learners? Can that sort of bring what you're doing? Is it harder for those people that are not visual learners or visual leaders to pick up in that visual learning space? You're on mute. Sorry, my darling.
Sorry, I didn't realize I'd already put myself back on there. No, I mean, the first time I ever delivered this talk was while I was doing award in adult education and training, because I'm qualified to teach at adult education level. And it was 2016, so it was quite a while back, and it was the first time I ever told a room full of people about that diagram. And I used it as the example for my exam at the end of the sort of training course. And I had the most random room of people training with me that week, which was an army sergeant. There was a police dog handler, a pathologist, and a chess master. And one of the questions they'd asked me was, how would I know if this is sinking in with my audience? Because I had to answer all these questions about the adult training. And I said, I'll know it's sinking in when I turn around and see a room full of blank, staring faces like they're all.
Yeah.
So I'll know they're listening when they look like they're not listening. And that was just kind of my empathy skills building in. And then literally about 5 minutes into my presentation, and the examiner's sitting to one side, I looked around and went, and there it is, the blank faces. And I actually pointed it out that I was noticing that moment. And the army sergeant came up afterwards and he said to me, he said, I'm so sorry if I looked like I wasn't listening. I said, no, I know you was. I know you were listening. And he said, I've just realized, he said, my daughter keeps saying she doesn't want to go to basketball. And I keep telling her, oh, you'll be fine, keep going. You know, you'll get back into it. You'll enjoy it again. He said, I've just realized I never asked her why she doesn't want to go.
Mm.
And it was just in that moment of talking through that emotional diagram, and that was only a 10-minute presentation. I've changed a little girl's life by him going home and asking her. And he was probably not, you know, one of the most neurotypical people I've met.
Mm.
But at the same time, everybody I've spoken to about this gets it, whether they're visual learners or not. Visual, auditory, and kinesthetic are our three types. Kinesthetic might be the hardest ones, but even then, we've got the visual ones they can print out and have that feel and put little pieces, you know, game pieces on and move around like a dice or a piece. So my daughter uses it with her children with little counters and things, and they put the pieces on. So you can get all the learning styles into it. But the most important thing that I've only realized in this last year, and it's actually through talking to my son and to Sue Bailey and to Rory Lemon, who's my business mentor, through having conversations with the three of them, I've pieced together that actually most people who are visual learners have the inability to visualize. Like we go, oh, there's a pic, you know, when I say to you, can you imagine an apple or a car? Is that they know what it is, but there's this thing called aphantasia where they don't have the ability to actually visualize it. And some people find that much harder than others. And for Sue Bailey, for example, she has no visual ability at all. Like she said to me one day, I don't even know what the color red is unless I look at it. She can't imagine the color red. So she has aphantasia on quite a severe level. And yet she's done this workshop and found it really, really helpful to piece together emotions that she's never understood in her whole life. But on the other end of it, I've had people, even like army sergeants, who have sat there and gone, I get this. And it's just made him start thinking differently, you know, probably about leadership in the army as well. But yeah, so thank you.
Thank you for answering that question. Yeah, lovely. Has anybody else got any other questions? I'm just going to take you off of the spotlight, if I may, and then I can see the whole room. Anybody else got any other questions for Kay whilst we have her with us? Is that James? Ojo, James, over to you, my friend. Feel free to ask away.
All right. Thank you so much, Sean, and it's good to see everyone again. Yeah, I didn't join the presentation from the start, but the little that I heard of Kay, presenting was amazing. I'm a leadership development enthusiast, and I believe that leadership starts with self. And not just that, but again, the most powerful way to learn is through visual. And every one of us, whether you have a visual ability or inability, I think it's a very powerful way to, to develop ourselves. And I also love all the point that she shared that it's not just about leadership at work, where you have to delegate and all of that. So leadership also starts with oneself, and with organization that I work, we are also developing all kinds of workshops and workshops and training on leadership, especially the leadership on the fourth part of it, of the circle that she was talking about, if you're not at home or at work or in school, you are actually on the part of nonprofit or giving and, philanthropist or, also maybe a therapist, so that side is the one that I'm more interested in. And I want to ask, maybe she will be interested in maybe having a conversation afterwards, to talk about how we can package a workshop trainee. And I would also love to explore more about, how she works with leaders and in visual learning. So then maybe we can talk about creating a workshop, for a group of leaders that we have within our organization and everywhere else.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm sure Kay will gladly take the opportunity to have a further conversation on that matter. Lovely. And obviously, Ian, we're going to be jumping into a breakout room again soon. So feel we'll perhaps start that off by making sure that you and Kay Jones are in the same room together. Jim Overbeam's got a question for you, Kay.
Yeah, definitely. So you have this circle, hey, with all of the emotions, and you always are in one and hopping from one to the other. But how does that work when you're in a state when you don't really feel anything? So let's say flow, or you feel very numb. Like, how do you put that in the circle?
If you're feeling numb, that would be down here, like in the darkness. To me, that is like a state of depression, whether it's a light state, like having a day off and going, I'm not going to think, I'm not going to do, I'm not going to celebrate. Sometimes this is a day off. But at the same time, if we're going right down into the depths of it, this is where it's the dangerous end, where people find it difficult to get out and need the therapies and support. Sorry, I've lost which way up I am. I need to mark it on the back. I need another copy on here. But yeah, so there's the only way you are not on this cycle is when you're not in life again. Like you are constantly, even when we're sleeping, you are on that emotional cycle somewhere all the time. Blinking, breathing, they're all subconscious reactions, but you blink because your eyes are dry and your brain's interpreting that through emotions. You breathe because of the oxygen and carbon dioxide levels, but it's an emotional reaction to breathe. And that is why also thoughts and feelings and actions affect breathing. Like you see something scary, your heart beats faster, you breathe faster. But at the same time, every breath you take is an emotional reaction. Every action, every reaction, every interaction. And so, yeah, great question, Jim. Thank you. But you are always on there somewhere. But this is where, for me, the emotional awareness work is important, because most people think that they only have emotions and feelings at certain times and are not aware of how they're there 24/7. And it's learning to pick up on all of that and use that to make more conscious choices every step of the way. And also know when life is going emotional dysregulation, like my son was everywhere, how to bring that back to center, recenter, to rebalance, and then consciously choose which way you want to go. Because we're not all, I mean, every human being is driven to happiness. I don't know a human being who's not driven to seek happiness. But the question is, how do we do that? And sometimes we need to be thoughtful. Sometimes we need to be driven and motivated. Sometimes we need a day off. But celebration is only a part of that cycle, but we need to keep that going. And ideally, we need to be cycling up here, not down here. So it's teaching people how to use this consciously and with awareness to make those choices, because somebody who's out there partying 24/7 and just going, yeah, I'm going to, live life and I'm going to have, they burn themselves out, and we don't want that either. So sorry, I'm going off down answering sort of about a dozen questions in one, sort of with James's as well. But yeah, I'm really excited about this. But thank you. I love teaching this. I get so passionate about it. You have to tell me to shut up.
Cool, thank
Shut
you.
up. No, brilliant. Thank you so much for that. Absolutely brilliant. Anybody got any other questions at all before we go into breakout rooms? No, excellent. Right, I'm going to stop the recording. Thanks ever so much, Kay, for that wonderful presentation. One last big round of applause for Kay Reeve, our emotional awareness expert. Thank you so much, my love. And Ian, if